Hello and welcome to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope you're doing well. Today I bring you yet more tactical analysis on the channel. Newcastle 2, Arsenal 0. Not the result we wanted, and our Champions League hopes all but done, barring a crazy result on the last day of the season. Nevertheless, I'll be breaking it all down for you. And if you do go on to enjoy today's video, a like would be super appreciated. And if you're new around here, why not consider subscribing, as it massively helps me and the channel out. But what will we be covering during today's video? Kicking off with the starting lineup, of course, and my thoughts, followed by a breakdown of stats and action areas before getting into key moments, and then to finish up some player analysis and my opinions of some performances. But let's dive into things, shall we? Kicking off with the starting lineup, and there were a few surprises, and to the delight of many Arsenal fans, we saw Gabriel and Benjamin White's names on that team sheet. Players who had picked up injuries and also had fitness concerns in recent weeks. So a huge boost ahead of what was a vital game. And we also saw the return of Tomiyasu on the right-hand side instead of him starting on the left, with Tavares back in the side as well. But the rest of the lineup pretty much picks itself. There's always that dilemma as to whether or not you want to go with Smith Rowe and Martinelli. And as I've mentioned many times on this channel, no real right or wrong answers in that particular department. A great headache for Arteta to have. Now, one thing I will say, Tomiyasu on that right-hand side to deal with Saint-Maximin was a good choice in my opinion. It's what he should have gone with against Spurs to deal with Son. So hopefully learning from his mistakes and seeing Tavares on the left-hand side as well is another big plus. Arteta showing confidence and faith in players. Although it wasn't repaid in this game, it's what we need to see more of. Unfortunately, we just weren't at the races in this particular fixture. Was it pressure? Was it age? Was it fitness? There are so many questions as to whether or not Arsenal were up for this particular game, and it was massively disappointing to see what the outcome was. But with regards to the lineup, what we pretty much expected. With regards to substitutions, we saw Cedric come on for Tomiyasu on the 39th minute. Cedric also struggled with Saint-Maximin, as did Tomiyasu. Hopefully his injury isn't too much of a concern, but with only one game left of the season, if he were to miss that fixture against Everton, he's got the summer to really get himself sorted out for the beginning of next season. Martinelli coming on for Smith Rowe, who had an underwhelming performance. We will speak about that in a little bit more detail. And then the final two substitutions with Lacazette coming on for Tavares and Pepe for Gabriel. Pretty much Arteta looking to throw the kitchen sink at it so that the season wasn't thrown away in this game. And Arsenal being allowed a fourth substitution due to a concussion sub earlier on in the game. Again, for the second game in a row, I haven't put a man of the match for Arsenal. It was difficult to pick one, a game of two halves. Some people said that Granit Xhaka had a particularly good game, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Who was your Arsenal man of the match from what was a very frustrating and difficult game to watch? With regards to stats and action areas, obviously the biggest and most important stat of them all is goals. Newcastle got 2 of them. Unfortunately for Ben White, he did manage to get an own goal, but we'll digest that in a little bit more detail shortly. Possession-wise, I did think Newcastle would have had a bit more possession on paper. They certainly did dominate that first half. Arsenal did change things in the second half, but it felt like we needed to go 1-0 down in order to really get involved in this game. 16 shots as well is not what you want to see. However, a lot of that did come towards the back end of the second half when Arsenal were really going for it, and not really much else to speak of in terms of stats. With regards to Newcastle's shape, no real surprises there with regards to them playing out wide, looking to really exploit maybe fitness concerns in Tomiyasu or generally the defensive errors that Tavares typically tends to make at left back. So no real surprises there. And one of their better performers was definitely Saint-Maximin. Tomiyasu normally really good with those one-on-ones, but he did seem to struggle. And one thing that I didn't like when we're looking at Arsenal's action areas, Arsenal's passing shape, is that Saka is very central, still the furthest player forward, which we see in most weeks as well. But those clusters that we typically see, those triangles that we see on the left and the right-hand side, those just weren't there, with Tomiyasu playing slightly more centrally, which we don't typically like to see him there. We normally see it in Nenny playing a little bit more central, dropping deep, splitting our centre-backs, pushing out wide with the likes of Tomiyasu or Cedric on the right, Tavares on the left, giving that support to the likes of Odegaard and Saka on the right, and Xhaka and Smith Rowe in this case on the left-hand side. But midfield, Arsenal just weren't in it, especially in that first half. And with injuries to the likes of Joe Willock and John Joe Sylvie, I did think Arsenal had a big opportunity to grab this game by the scruff of the neck, especially in midfield. But we just weren't at the races for one reason or another. Looking here at the goals from the game, not too much to analyse this particular fixture. One thing that really did frustrate me, having a look here at picture number 1, we can see the ball starts in the top left-hand corner there at left back, and it's just one simple long pass all the way down to Joelinton. Arsenal then having to run back towards their own goal, and we can see here in the 2 yellow lines, Arsenal in a fairly good shape, that typical shape that Arsenal were in, that 4-4-2 counter-attacking shape when out of possession. But with Cedric fairly high, you can see there in that yellow circle in the top left-hand corner, it means that El Neni is dragged out of position in midfield, being pulled away from that deep double pivot, and he's tasked with essentially tracking down Joelinton. Now, El Neni is not the fastest and most physical of players, so a bit of a mismatch there, but he has to track back. And then Callum Wilson, a very, very quick player. We can see here in picture number 2 that he does manage to get beyond our defenders, but stays behind Joelinton to keep himself onside. And Joelinton gets the ball into the box, asking a question of the Arsenal defenders. Now, with Ben White and Gabriel both running back towards their own goal, it's unfortunate that when the touch does come from Ben White's foot, it ends up in the back of the net instead of going for a corner. And at this point, Arsenal go 1-0 down, and Arsenal need to come out and really show what they're made of. And for me, this is when Arsenal really decided to show up a little bit too late for my liking. And with all the substitutes that Arsenal then made very, very late on in the game to throw the kitchen sink at it, we can see here in picture number 3, I think there were only 2 or 3 defenders on at this point, one of them being Granit Xhaka, if you can even count him as a defender. With Arsenal going for the game, shape is completely out of the window. And we can see here there's a ball over the top, just outside our box to Callum Wilson. He goes through on goal 1-on-1 with Aaron Ramsdale, which in all fairness to him, he does save. But the ball does fall quite nicely to Bruno Guimaraes, who has essentially an empty net to tuck the ball into. And at that point, it is 2-0 to Newcastle with hardly any time left on the clock. And game, set and match, unfortunately. With regards to Arsenal shape, I do know that we typically tend to analyse Arsenal shape, or Newcastle shape in this case, in these particular fixtures. But for me, in the first half, going forward, we played in our typical 4-2-3-1 formation with Granit Xhaka occasionally moving forward as that number 8, as we've discussed and analysed on this channel before. And then when out of possession, we did fall into our usual 4-4-2, looking for that counter-attack, a low block, not allowing much space between the lines for the likes of Newcastle. But they did go quite wide, and they've done very, very well. And then it's very difficult to analyse shape, especially in that second half, with Arsenal making 4 substitutions, most of which, barring Tomiyasu, attacking subs because Arsenal really wanted to go for it. So there wasn't necessarily a shape. It was more a case of getting as many players forward, as many creative players on the pitch as possible, those players who are threatening, players who can score goals. So very, very difficult to analyse. And then to finish up, a quick conversation on a few players. Granit Xhaka had a better game amongst those that didn't have very good performances, and he did come out and, I wouldn't say slaughter, but some choice words for players amongst the Arsenal squad. He wasn't best pleased, and it'd be interesting to see whether or not Arteta comes out and says anything about it. But as I said, if there was a slightly better performance, Granit Xhaka was probably in and amongst it with 86% passing accuracy, 1 key pass, 4 out of 4 long balls completed, 2 out of 2 dribbles completed, and 4 successful duels out of 7. When I say he had a better game amongst others, the first half was definitely a game to forget for most of these Arsenal players. Our midfield, in my opinion, didn't exist. There was no transitional play. A lot of our balls did go long to the likes of Eddie Nketiah, who did, in all fairness to him, win quite a few headers or Saka on the right-hand side. It wasn't until the second half that our midfield became more involved in the game. Now, Smith Rowe is another player that I'd like to have a quick conversation about because it is becoming a bit of a concern for me. And hopefully, with it being so close to the end of the season, it's something that can be sorted out during pre-season. He's had a fantastic start to this particular season, but it has kind of dwindled. And I don't think he's been as involved as he should be or as good as he has been at the start of the season. He hasn't seemed fully fit, in my opinion, completing sort of 60, 70 minutes here when starting a game or coming on for sort of 20 minutes at the end of a game. And yesterday, when he did play, it wasn't good. He wasn't very involved. He didn't have much of an impact. He wasn't much of a threat. And we don't like to bash players on this channel, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that maybe his confidence is low. Definitely something for Arteta to work on. And the stats that you can see on screen for him as well don't make for very good reading. So hopefully it's just a confidence thing. Hopefully it's something that Arteta can work on over the summer. And there was a huge difference when Martinelli came on that left-hand side. Very, very direct, full of energy. And you can certainly see why Martinelli has been starting over Smith Rowe more recently. Last but not least, we've got Martin Odegaard, Captain Odegaard. And the reason I want to talk about him is, again, in the second half, he had somewhat of a better performance with 89% passing accuracy, 3 key passes, 1 successful long ball out of 1 attempt, 7 successful duels out of 15, and 2 dribbles completed out of 4. But the reason I want to speak about Martin Odegaard is he's often criticised for going missing against the big teams or in big games, for example. And he did go missing a little bit in that first half, in my opinion. And as captain of Arsenal Football Club, he really needs to get the boys going. He often does set the tempo when Arsenal play well. But for me, he just needs to kind of step that up now in terms of his consistency. He did take the game by the scruff of the neck in the second half, but too little, too late. And as I said, this isn't a channel where I like to bash and overly criticise players, but it's certainly an area that Martin Odegaard needs to work on in terms of being consistent throughout the season and not going missing. And as a key player that Arsenal often look to unlock defences, and as a captain, he certainly needs to be there more often for me. So that is going to about wrap things up for today's episode of Tactical Analysis. Not the result we wanted. And as already mentioned at the start of the video, it goes down to the final game of the season. Can Norwich beat Spurs and Arsenal beat Everton? If that were to happen, Arsenal would scrape Champions League football. Stranger things have happened. And if you have enjoyed today's video, a like would be super appreciated. And if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing, as it massively helps me out. But that is going to about wrap things up. I'm JC, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe and take care.